Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the news behind the news with Raf Kintav on Mix 94.7 FM. And I hope that you had a great weekend. And thanks for joining us today. Here in the studio with me, I have Miss Nikita Muhki, an occupational therapist and an old-time friend, classmate from high school, a great product of MAC and Samaritan Academy.
Yeah.
So, what's up, Nikita? How are you doing? And thanks for being on the program.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, okay, great. There's quite a lot that we could talk about. As one, especially your occupation or profession. I think that is something worth discussing because one in particular, like this whole month of March, I've had different women from different backgrounds, you could say, professions, talk about the work that you do, contribution to the community. And then, I like to just go a little deeper than just that too. So I'll start off with, if you could tell us about yourself, but also I think what makes your story interesting twist is that you come from a mixed background, and not just mixed in terms of Black and Caucasian, but Black and Indian.
Yes.
Yeah, so what was that like growing up with, I guess, two different cultures?
Okay, well, so my mom is Black from here, and my dad is Indian. His family is from India, but he was born in Nigeria. So he himself has like a mix of different like personalities, and his story is pretty interesting in his background and how that kind of transpired into us and our household. We didn't really grow up learning the language or anything like that, but the culture was there, like the Indian food and the mindset of like, the pressure of being the child of an Indian man was definitely there, and it kind of felt like nothing was ever good enough. I could remember like in math school that like if I got a 90 or something, it was like, you could do better than this, So that pressure was definitely there from the beginning of my like early developmental years.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. And how did you end up working through that as you get older, even having that discussion maybe with your dad about, how that has affected you? I think a lot of us, as we get older, we end up in that phase where we kind of parent our parents. And then, for some people who are blessed to be able to just have that ability to sit down with your parents, especially, if you have very strict parents. But just to reason things out, because sometimes we curse and get mad with our parents, but oftentimes we don't even explore the life they had to endure that made them the way they are. Yeah. So how was that like on your end, you would say?
Well, as a primary school child, I really didn't have much of a say in what my parents expected of me. But then going into high school, especially going to high school at 11 years old, you end up in a different crowd and a different age group. So I was pretty young when I started high school. And so my influence and my influence on my friends was like much older than me. So I wouldn't say that I was rebellious, but I did start to see life in a different way, and that grades wasn't like something that I was really caring about in my early years of high school. And my parents just kind of accepted that. Like I repeated second form. It wasn't a very proud moment, and my parents just kind of like was like, she's gonna find her way, she's gonna figure it out. And that was just because I had a lot of pressure on me, or I felt perceived pressure. I always call it perceived pressure because my parents weren't like, you have to do XYZ. It's just that I felt like I had to do it. So that perceived pressure kind of like went away in the beginning years of high school, and then it came back like later on when I kind of like woke up and was like, hey, this is not me. I need to do these things to get where I want to be. So I didn't have a conversation with my parents about the pressure that I was feeling. I just kind of did my own thing, and they just kind of followed.
Okay, so either later on, like after high school and stuff, or after college?
Well, when I came into fifth form and I started to think about the rest of my life and thinking about going to school, my parents really didn't pressure me into going to higher education. It wasn't, if I went, it was great. If I didn't, it was fine. So I kind of give myself that pressure because of, I think, what was instilled in me early on, like getting good grades, finding a good job, and all of that. And I did work right out of high school and realized that this is not what I wanted. Yeah, like I did not want to just be working for somebody, and I mean I am doing that now. It's like totally fine, but at the level that I was working at, it wasn't enough.
Correct, of course.
Yeah, so at some point you just realize that you want more, and then you do what you have to do to get it. Like your parents might force you or push you to do it, but if you have it in yourself, you'll be much better off.
Yeah, that's cool because I could definitely remember that. back when, especially when CXC came about.
Yeah.
One of the things that I definitely admired was the fact that you were a great student, and I actually have a question based on that, because not everyone is academic here. That is very true, but I do think that for students who are book inclined, let's say, if that's you, be the best at it. You know what I mean? So I'm curious about what was your process of committing towards studying, but also what do you do to study efficiently? Because I know you brought that into your college life as well.
So after I repeated second form, and I kind of had to go through the whole process of doing all of that again. I wasn't a very hard studier early on because school just came pretty easy to me and I didn't feel like I needed to study to keep up. But then when I stayed back, it wasn't even because of my grades. It was just because of my behavior. Mm-hmm. And so I just had to change a lot of things about myself and then put in that extra work to study and to get everything done. So at that point, my parents weren't on me about tests, books, assignments, nothing. I had to decide to do it because if they were just hey, do what you want, I could have ended up in a very different position now.
True.
So I think it's something that you have to have in you internally to want to do better. And so my study, I learned about my study habits very early on in school. And so carrying that throughout college now made it a lot easier for me to be successful. Miss Lucas had a really big role in my life, in my development. So just learning, what is your best way of learning? Is it sitting down in a book all the time? Is it repeating things to yourself? Is it writing things down? Is it learning songs? And I went on YouTube, and for the same content we were learning in science class, I'd find music that matches it. And I would make learning fun for me. I would make learning interesting. I would make myself want to get into it. And that's how I learned about myself and my learning needs.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because you mentioned Miss Lucas. I remember one of the assignments she gave us to this day that sticks with me is the elements of literature.
Yeah.
And when she broke us up into individual, not individual, but small groups, and we had to create a song based on a specific element. To this day, I remember the song that me, Kevon, Abdur, and Edwin and Chris made was simile, and then we plot. So to this day,
it, right?
I remember it, and I think about teachers like Mr. Cook, for example, who used to, it still does actually, play games with students, and it made learning fun because you remember everything that was taught to you in class. It wasn't just you don't want to come to this class because you're so boring. You feel so bored, and you don't feel like you will be able to perform on a test. But it's you're being empowered with the information opposed to just having to memorize it and regurgitate it afterwards.
And there are some teachers that do have that teaching style where they just expect you to memorize and just regurgitate information, and you have to know within yourself if that works for you, and if it does, great, but if you need more, then you would have to put in that extra work.
Exactly. So that the moment when you realize working is good, you get a little pocket change, but you want better, you want to move further in your life. What was it like for you determining the school you want to go, college application? Did you study finance and all of that? Because I know that is also a loophole that many of us had to go through as well.
I didn't grow up with wealthy parents who were able to just, give me thousands of dollars, be like, go get your degree. It really wasn't that way. And in fourth or fifth form, I can't really remember, but there was this college expo that they had at Bel Air.
Yes,
and we
I remember.
all went and everything like that. And the school that I ended up going to was there. And that's actually the only school I applied to because guess what? Applications are expensive. College applications are expensive, and I could not apply to 5 different schools and, get into one and just be like, okay, great. I applied to one school, and by the grace of God, I got into that school.
What school was that?
That was St. Thomas University in Miami.
Okay, so you were very, so, but did you have in mind what you wanted to study and to choose that school specifically? Did you compare amongst other schools?
I did. So, of all the schools that were at that expo, St. Thomas actually stood out to me because of the financial assistance that they were giving to St. Martin students. So I think that's a big, that's that's a big criteria when I was looking at the school. What is a financial aid given to international students? Because international students have to pay tuition at a much higher rate.
Yeah.
We have to find housing.
Yeah.
We have to think about food, transportation, and everything. So it's not like in-state tuition is great, and I think like Tallahassee gives international students in-state tuition.
Yeah, as well as like Johnson Wales specific schools that St. Martin has a agreement with. I
just wasn't drawn to those schools though. Like my personality is not very outgoing or boisterous. Like it might seem that way, but I'm actually very like laid back and like to myself. And so I went to a private school that was small. The class size for me was very important because I know I cannot function in big classes. And I was hearing that the schools in Tallahassee were larger.
That's true.
Hundreds of students in a class, and at St. Thomas University it was only like 20 students, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty small.
Yeah, and it was good for me because I did end up having like 1 or 2 classes in my master's that were huge classes, like 200-300 students, and I did not do very well in that class. There was no like personal interaction.
Yeah, with the professor.
Teacher. Yeah. It was mostly like the tutor and stuff like that, and I wasn't working out.
You know, you mentioned something that just struck me because I don't know when last that was done. A college expo.
Oh yeah, I have no idea.
Because I remember when we went to it. Like, okay, they had even job expos. It paused for a while. They had one not too long ago for like the airport and I think the hospital and stuff. But come to think of it, I don't know when last there was a college expo held on St. Martin.
I have.
Yeah, that's something we're bringing up. Because at least from early on, it's important to get students are figuring out what they want. Whether they want to stay at home, there's nothing wrong with staying at home. Whether you want to go to NEPA, USM, do the UVI program at USM or just go to a regional school, international school, etc. I think that is something necessary because it helps to prepare students for young. Like Malcolm X said, education is a passport to the future. The future belongs to those who prepare for it today.
Exactly, and knowing what your options are. That you could be in 2nd, 3rd, 4th form, but at least knowing what your options are when you finish is a very good thing to know.
Yeah, especially with parents that they could figure out.
Financially.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, your parents have to be filing their taxes. Like that situation in itself could determine your child's future. So,
yes, exactly.
Thank God my mother was filing her taxes.
Yeah, because then the next thing too is the study financing element. Unfortunately, not every student gets study financing. You can appeal. It's not guaranteed you'll get it. And then, so all of those elements too. I've had several persons be on a program talking about education. I think we just have to be more intentional about the education we give to our students and because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are going to continue to shape and guide this country, move this country forward.
Exactly. Especially those that do come back,
Yeah.
I could have chosen to stay.
You ever thought about staying or you
I did.
Wasn't?
But,
okay.
I mean, this is home, and I had a plan before I even went to school. My dad was like, what are you going to do with that degree? And I was like, work at Sister Basilia. And guess where I'm working now?
Sister Basilia. Oh, okay, that's great.
And this was when Sister Basilia was still in Salt Reward. Like, I didn't know I would have been working in this capacity. I just knew that because I used to volunteer there early on in high school, and I just knew that I really enjoyed it was fulfilling to me, We always hear people that, I want to do this because I want to help. No, that's not. You can help in many ways. You can help by being a librarian. That's a way to help people. But knowing exactly in what capacity you want to show up for people is how I kind of like guided my my career, my chosen path, because I also worked in Miami in a school for emotionally and behaviorally disturbed kids. And it was good, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do. Yeah. So.
No, it makes sense because we all have skills. We all have passions and stuff, and you don't want your gift to go to waste because all in the name of helping, because helping don't mean that you do nothing and volunteer everywhere. You could just do one good deed consistently, and that is your way of giving back. And like, I'm glad that you mentioned even that you volunteered there, because another thing I really emphasize on the program is in particular making students aware of the career possibilities on St. Martin. Because, for example, like maybe in our radio, I always credit Mr. Cook. Mr. Cook took me to, PGD2 at a time with Lloyd, who had like the dominant show on St. Martin at a time. And since then I was like, I want to be in media. I want to be a journalist. And, here I am. So I think, it's when we allow children to see further, see beyond just the hotels and the restaurants. There are ways that you can apply the sciences on St. Martin in so many varying ways. You could work at the labs, for example. How many students know that you could, because you could work in the lab and all those things. So I think that matters a lot.
Yeah, and just a couple months of the exposure is enough to like kind of guide your ideas on what you would be willing to do,
Definitely. So you studied psychology.
Yes.
As a bachelor's, but now you work as an occupational therapist. So how did that journey come about?
Well, occupational therapy is actually the foundation of occupational therapy is mental health. But I did not know that at the time that I was choosing occupational therapy. So when I went through the whole process of schooling and stuff like that, I chose psychology because I wanted to become a child psychologist. That's where I was headed, and that was because of Miss Bailey and everyone at St. Martin Academy. Like, my story is like just so extreme. I was like this rebel, this really bad not bad person. I was not a bad person. I was just having a phase,
Yeah, I mean teenage
rebellious stage.
Teenage
and then that like
because you were still a good student.
Yeah, I was still a good student,
exactly.
But of course, like if you have different influences, you kind of like act out in those ways.
True.
So
that's true.
I had that like journey of experiencing that part of me and like knowing that that's not who I am. So of course, like Miss Bailey and the other psychologists I was there had a big role on all of that. And so
Miss President?
Yes, Miss President.
Okay.
I wanted to do child psychology. I went to school for it. I did it, and it was great. It was a great experience. But then I actually got into the practice of it, and I was like, okay, we're just talking, but we're not making change. We're talking to you guys every day, and we're giving you all of these, like, so I did a lot of, like, self-confidence, anger management, different behavioral strategies. I had a course on behavior modification, making plans for these kids, and the problem that I found was that I can give them all of the tools, but if they themselves are not willing to do anything about it, they won't change, So that was a kind of like hard for me to accept because I want to help and I want to see change. But in psychology and even teaching, you don't see change in the moment. It takes a period of time and it takes commitment and like
consistency.
These, they have to come. And then psychology in St. Martin is still very taboo. Like people are like, ugh, I don't need psychology. And I'm like, okay. So it's kind of like, I was really at like tug of war with like choosing what to study, but I also knew that psychology, I wanted it to be my foundation, and study financing was not in agreement with what I previously wanted to do, which was play therapy. I wanted to become a play therapist with kids.
Well, I never heard of that actually. Play therapy.
Yeah,
true.
People don't really. It's something that's like a luxury therapy for people who could afford it.
Oh.
But I like to interact on a playful level with children, and the developmental age of children is for me very interesting and very driving. Like it makes me energized to just do it. So I wanted to go to school for that, but they were not up for it.
Yeah.
So that's another problem we have. Like the government is kind of dictating what you become and what you do.
And the priority list.
The priority
I'm gonna Google that during the break because even so, I mean, God knows how much they spend to create this priority list with consultants and stuff, and it's just like for example, I remember a time even like I had one of the ministers here and stuff, and what I realized the connection that needs to be made that is between education and the economy, because we're not preparing students for the world, for the future. We're just feeding them straight into the current model, but this current model will not last forever, and it's already evolving. So when you look at sometimes you look at the study of the priority list, you ask yourself, I mean, is St. Martin even thinking about the next 10 years? Yes, I do agree to a point that is the nation, like taxpayers and stuff, they're allowing you this money to be able to study and develop yourself, etc. So you have an obligation to give back, contribute to your home, but at the same time, it has to be towards a future, because you don't also want to keep people locked in a box,
right? Because
that box it can become a triangle. It can like and even not just that, not even it being transformed, but it can very well just be shattered, Yeah,
that's true. The priority list to me was just mind-boggling. Like, there's nothing on this list that I even care to do.
So psychology was a safe bet.
Psychology was not on it.
No?
No, I appealed.
Oh, so
Yes,
you were one who had to
I
appeal.
appealed.
Wow. So that says a lot. But anyhow,
I appealed.
that says
And then
a
I
lot.
found a loophole. Yes.
Okay, I got you. So, and then in your master's, what did you?
I did occupational therapy, and at that point, occupational therapy was on the priority list, so that made it a lot easier for me in
There's an
terms of
improvement.
financing my school. Yes.
Okay. And how did you determine then that is what you want to do at the end of it all?
I researched the next best thing to play therapy and found that occupational therapy was right under it, and it is. So I am getting to live my dream on providing therapy in a playful manner, especially to kids, but I also work in a lot of different capacities with older people, which I absolutely love. So that was my way of kind of like getting what I wanted, but also learning a little bit more in terms of what was available under occupational therapy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you made a switch studying from Florida, heading all the way to Canada.
Yeah.
Why that? And also, what was it like?
Well, so that wasn't the plan actually. After I finished in Miami, I came home. Irma hit. After Irma hit, everything was just like, forget about it. But before I came back, I applied to schools in Holland because it's a lot cheaper.
True.
And the course of study was a lot shorter, but I didn't get in. And of course, I did the same tactic that I did for my bachelor's. I only applied to one school. And that's where we fall into a problem, because if you only apply to one school, by the time you get your response, the opportunity to reapply to other schools is already closed. You have to wait for the next application cycle. So, and the reason for not getting it was just absolutely bogus. But I did not get into Leiden, which was completely fine, because I then had that gap year to kind of figure out everything else and figure out what school would be best for me, because I really did not want to go to Holland. Honestly, it was never something that was in me to like, hey, I want to go to Holland. So then I had some friends that was applying to Western University in London, Canada, and I was like, okay, let me check it out, let me see what programs they have. And they had occupational therapy, and I was like, booyah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then I applied. Irma hit, and I had to like explain them that I did not have the resources that I need at the moment, but I will get my application in. And they just gave me like maybe a 2-week extension, because that's all I really needed. And then I got in, and the visa process was like super easy. It was like I didn't even have to travel to get a visa. I just had to do it online, get all of my like medical paperwork in order, and then I was there. When I got there, though, I did fall into some visa problems. The lady was like, where's your this doctor here had to fill in some paperwork to say that I was like in good health to be there, and then like it just never got sent.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, so I kind of like got stuck on the airport for a bit, which is also like very anxiety provoking, because
exactly.
you have no one there, and you're just like, what do I do? So they're really compassionate when it comes to thinking about those things and understanding that this is an international student and she needs support. So I honestly think there was like divine intervention when it comes to me ending up at Western University. There was like they even made a error on my application letter. Instead of putting me as an international student, they accepted me as a domestic student, and that was a total mistake. Yeah, I know, right?
That's quite a mistake.
That's quite a mistake, because they lost like thousands of dollars. Like, international students is how they make money. It's their
exactly.
business,
Yeah.
But they made a mistake, and that's because I was the first international student to be accepted into that program.
Oh, into that program. Okay.
Occupational, in that program, they never accepted international students before, and I was the first. So they kind of like used my experience to kind of guide the acceptance of future international students, which I also felt like a sense of pride for contributing to that school in that way. So the journey was incredible.
Yeah. It's a Martin to the world, basically.
Yeah, basically, because Miami is like very similar to St. Martin in terms of like atmosphere and temperature and vibes and stuff like that. It's very similar to home.
It can feel like home.
Yes,
exactly.
Miami
That's true.
is very similar to home, and then you have this like 180 Canada freezing cold. Very different, like people, like you appear different, you look different, they just know you're not from here, so it was just surreal.
Gotcha. Well, cool. And one of the things I'm always curious about, persons who help people also need help in different ways, in a sense of you help care for persons, but what was it like starting out to realize that you have to guard your mental health, but also so while in school, but even now throughout your career, and what steps you take or practices that you make custom of to protect it?
Well, no, I can't say that I have grown a lot in that aspect. In my early careers of like being away from home and not having like support in that location, like the first year is always hard because you don't know anyone, you're still building connections, you're still getting to know people, so it can get lonely. But for me, in a sense, I was okay. Like we have WhatsApp, we have, you know, our parents and stuff like that. But in the first month, I did seek support from the counselor on campus and say like, hey, I'm feeling kind of out of place here. And she kind of just, you know, spoke to me for a couple weeks and like make sure that I was all right. And then I quickly got involved into things related to my field. Like I was in the psychology club, I was in student government, I was in the Senate, I was literally in everything. But I still wasn't like a very social person. I don't know how to explain. Like I was involved, but in my bubble of involvement, you know. So I got involved and I started to make connections. There was a Caribbean Students Association, and that can feel a lot like home.
Yeah,
those people have become my best friends.
Yeah,
in the Caribbean Student Association, there were people from Sable. Like who would have thought?
Little
from
Sable.
Little Sable, you would have met people. And all like my best friend that I met in college was actually a throwaway. Literally. So like if I chose to stay in my room and just not interact with anybody, I would not have made those connections, and then the next 4 years would have been very hard. It could have gotten, you know, very lonely, very depressing. So at that point in my early career, I just kind of got into different social groups and kept close to people that were like me in terms of my culture and stuff like that, and it was okay. And then my last year of school was just like hell. You know, because that's like your final year. You want to maintain this GPA.
Yeah, you want to finish on a strong note.
Yep. You know, you want to get it. And again, so it comes back to that perceived pressure. It's like, my family isn't pressuring me to do well, but I want to do well for my family and my country. You know, I want to wear that like robe that has St. Martin flag on it and be proud. So my last year, I really pushed myself to the point where I got very sick. And I got so sick, and my doctor was like, you need to slow down, you need to rest. I used to drink Red Bull. I used to sleep 4 hours a day just to maintain this grade, this A+. And it wasn't worth it, you know? And I really was not paying attention to my physical health or my mental health. And that took a toll on me, and I finished. Because
then you end up, I'm pretty sure, experiencing burnout.
Yeah. Like the crash is the worst.
Terrible,
I remember going to sleep after I handed in like my thesis paper, because I was part of a research program, and I handed in my paper, and that crash after, when I was sleeping, I was dreaming like I was in my class. That's the only way my brain could process being at peace, being at rest. I felt like I was in a lecture. And when I woke up, I was like, I was out for most of the day.
Wow, I feel that, because I remember what I did though during my last semester is I pulled back from a lot of stuff I was engaged with. I was like, let all my I guess colleagues and so forth know, you know, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I was only focused on my internship, which was great in the sense of it was NPR, and my news director particularly, she was into investigative journalism, and you know, to do that, you know, you need time to read and call people, etc. So yeah.
I think that's where we like kind of like not mess up, but we need to realize that you can't just cut off everything else. So like I was not going out, I was not going to parties. My roommates would, you know,
need a balance.
Yeah, you need a balance. My roommates would go out, have fun. They would have like these festivals every now and then, and they would go, and I would be home studying or in the library studying, and I did not take on that like fun aspect of college. I did not enjoy those moments, and looking back, I'm like, damn, I really should have. Like that was the time, you know?
Yeah, because that is the college years are among one of your best years.
Yeah. Like they would invite me out, and towards like the middle part, I was like, okay, I'll go. But I took my flashcards, I took my notes, and I would be in there, you know, reading stuff like that. Like we would have not dorm parties, but like just hang out in the dorm, make jokes and have snacks. And one of my friends from St. Croix, I was just chilling, and his bed ended up full of like highlighter ink. He was like, but Mooks, you highlighter all over my bed, Mooks. And we really close friends, and that's like people that look out for you, and they're like, I understand you want to study, but you gotta slow down. And I didn't listen to it, you know. So I missed out on those exciting aspects of it, and I also made myself sick.
Gotcha. Well, you live and you learn.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where my master's come in, because I learned from that experience. And to be honest with you, I was not very hyper focused on my grades or my performance. I was more worried about my competence and becoming a efficient therapist. So yes, I wanted to do well and I wanted to have good grades, but I didn't pressure myself into the point where I had to study 24/7 and, be this perfect A student. But I found a balance and I gave it my best in my master's, and I'm happy for the experience in Miami.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the news behind the news with Ralph Kintab on Mix 94.7 FM. And this afternoon, I'm joined with Nikita Muhki, who is an occupational therapist here on the island. So now I'd like to get into OT, particularly. Okay. After you finished, get your master's and stuff, what was it like in determining where you wanted to work and maybe even doing an internship, etc.? Yeah. How was your job search like? I guess it may be easy given that you study something that's also a need. Yeah. So how was that like?
That's the bonus, studying something that's a need. So finding a job wasn't relatively hard. But in terms of internships, the program that I went to consisted of 4 internships in the 2 years that we were there. So I left school with a lot of experience. I left with experience in the hospital, in community practice, in school health, and telehealth. So the last part of my education kind of got a little, what's the appropriate word? Sidetracked by Corona, because that time frame where I had to go on my last internship, everything just shut down, the world stopped. So I did not get to do my last internship in person, but it was online, and that's where the telehealth part came in. And then there was this whole delay on finishing school at the right time and stuff like that. So I ended up coming back home, finishing school online, and then during that time just investigating where would be a good fit for me to work. There's an occupational therapy practice in Kobe. It's called Enable. There's the Antoinette Sortin there, and she's a great occupational therapist. I've worked in the hospital in Canada, so I felt like working in the hospital here would have been, an easy go. I sent a letter of intent. I sent my resume. I sent my CV to the hospital, telling them about the services and how occupational therapy can be impactful in the hospital. And they were like, thanks, but no thanks. No, so if you have occupational therapy outside of the hospital, having it within the hospital in such a small setting kind of looks different. The hospital in Canada was big. It was 8 floors high, OT in a hospital was very much needed, but I can understand here how it might be a little bit limited. So then after applying to the hospital, I also applied to the White and Yellow Cross, and that's where I'm currently working now. But that was not going to be the case when I applied. So I applied and I told them that I was finishing in August and that this is what I have in skills so far. This is the capacity that I've worked in. And then they emailed me and they were like, thanks for your interest, but we already have 2 occupational therapists working for us. And I was like, okay, so what next? What do I do? And I kind of got discouraged, because where else am I going to work? Other than private practice, what else am I going to do? I have this big degree and I can't use it. So I really got discouraged, and then I started to look into fields that's close to occupational therapy, but not exactly. And then I applied to career counseling in the government and school counseling and stuff like that. But
it's still not
borderline.
It. Yeah, I got you.
And I think if you project what you want into the universe, it comes back to you. So 2 days after White and Yellow Cross told me that they already had the positions filled, they emailed me and they asked me if I would be willing to come in for an interview, because the person that was supposed to come from Holland kind of tapped out to be with their family during Corona and stuff like that. So True. Divine intervention, man.
Great way for, especially, making a way for a logo.
Yes, so exactly. Divine intervention, because the position was filled. It shouldn't have been mine, but my name was probably on it to begin with. So I went, I had the interview, and I was like, yes, this is it. This is what I want. Before even going to school, I was at White and Yellow Cross quite often, because my dad, who has COPD, needed to get these braces and from the instrument maker that's at White and Yellow Cross, and he gave me the contact information for somebody that was there, and I went and I had a look, and I was like, this is a pretty cool place to be. I like this. And this was before I even started my occupational therapy program, so I was pretty interested in it from the get-go. When something is for you, everything just gravitates you to it. So I did the interview, they liked me, they accepted me. I started working the following, so I had the interview in September, I started working in October 1st, and it has been a great journey since then. I'm working in populations that I didn't even expect to be working in right now. So
okay, so one of the things I'm curious about is exactly what you do, because I asked that because is there a huge difference between an occupational therapist and a physical therapist?
Yeah. So an occupational therapist looks at the person, what they want to do and what they're able to do. So, for example, a person who has had a stroke, before the stroke probably was very independent and could have done everything for themselves, dress, feed, work, and stuff like that. Now, a stroke can impact parts of your brains and take away certain skills that you had before. So an occupational therapist in that aspect now would help you get back to that space that you were, where you were able to feed yourself and do all of those functional things on your own, whereas a physical therapist would basically make you stronger. So they focus more on re-strengthening the muscles and stuff like that, and an occupational therapist looks at what you have, where you're at, and how can you perform with it. So even if you're not strong enough to, or if you have a tremor in your hand, how can we adapt the situation to make it possible for you to do this?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how you describe it basically really says to me that, one, you need a lot of patience, and you have to give a lot of care, be empathetic and stuff. So, what is it like journeying with a person?
So, we have to understand from the beginning that if someone has had a loss in function, that they might be going through a lot of things mentally and emotionally. So they might still be struggling early on with accepting that this is where they're at now, and focusing mainly on kind of giving them hope in terms of, if you put in the work, this is what can happen. But then you also reach a point where you do and you do and you do, and that person is not going to get better. And then you have to deal with that part of it. So for me, it is an emotional roller coaster that they are going through, and I'm experiencing it with them. And also being empathetic and understanding that it's a really hard thing to go through. You were once fully functional, fully able, perfectly fine, and now you have to depend on everyone and your surroundings to take care of you. So it's a very big loss to go through.
And like you mentioned, for example, someone who has a stroke and stuff, but generally who would need an occupational therapist?
So we work with people who have had a stroke, amputations. There's some autoimmune diseases that can create very debilitating functional problems. So
like which?
There's one called neuromyelitis optica. So it's a condition that causes inflammation in your spinal cord, and then that kind of just you become this person that's not able to take care of yourself anymore.
Never heard of that. Wow.
Yeah. So it's autoimmune, and it causes your spinal cord to become inflamed, and your spinal cord is basically everything that controls what you do. We've had people who have had car crashes and ended up with a traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injuries, and that's just in the rehab category. There's amputations. I don't know if I said that already.
Yeah, you mentioned amputations. Yeah.
It's at Sister Basilia. We also deal with people who have intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, at elderly care. So that's in White and Yellow Cross as well, but it's not in the nursing home. So it's the elderly that have a little bit more independence and can take care of themselves, but maybe can't live on their own or needs a little bit more guidance, or maybe they're experiencing vision loss, and then we have to kind of provide rehabilitation in a way that how does a person who was seeing before now live in a world where they can't see? So it's a lot of basically looking at what a person has right now, what skills they have right now, and how can they live with those skills.
Gotcha. One of the things you mentioned that I would like if you could detail much is, a bit, is you mentioned, for example, someone who's been in a car accident. Now, unfortunately, like last year alone, I mean, we've had so many car accidents. It's almost unbelievable. Even starting out of this year, there were a time where, especially when it was, you had a week of a minimum, 4 or 5
Few
scooter accidents, you know. So can you detail, what are the type of effects that from your end, your profession, and that you have to deal with persons who end up in accidents? What are the varying possibilities of setbacks that they can experience physically?
Well, it depends on the type of crash. So if you get in a crash and you end up hitting your head or something like that, you can get a traumatic brain injury, and that can cause effects where you forget how to talk. Your motor capabilities is reduced, your walking is reduced, your cognition is reduced. So you kind of have to relearn a lot of things. Like, you might see a spoon, you might know that it's a spoon, but you might not even remember how to use a spoon. So you have to get that person's brain back to the where it was before, and it takes a lot of like intense therapy to get you back to that point. And even if they were not affected cognitively, maybe physically they were, and they had to lose a limb, or they had this really bad surgery and they have to recover from. So physically it can take a lot out of you as well, because if you were very hands-on before and now your hands are not very functional because of the accident, what does life look like for you after that? Can you return to what you were doing before? And if not, what happens? How can we get you back into your community, involved in what you were doing before, if you don't have the skills of your hands? So getting in a car accident can be very traumatic. It could be a very emotionally heavy thing, but it can affect you very physically as well.
Do you guys do any sort of speech therapy as well, or that's totally okay.
So White and Yellow Cross has speech therapist, physical therapist, occupational therapist.
But I mean, like in occupational therapy, is an element of that, or is that a totally separate?
Oh no, speech therapy is completely different. They have different goals. So we all might see one client and have different goals for them.
Gotcha.
If I work in the mouth, it's usually for like oral sensory, or how does a person get, if they don't have good grip, how do they get food from the plate to their mouth? And then speech therapy will do more like the swallowing, and if someone has a facial paresis, how do they reincorporate those muscles? So I can work in the mouth, but in a different capacity than a speech therapist.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Because then another thing that came to mind then is particularly what goes into the actual study then. Because for example, I know and it's not like it limits you, but then I know you did business in high school. Yeah. Now you're actually working in science field, which is interesting too. But what exactly goes into the actual study? Like full anatomy? And
cadavers, everything.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the program that I got into, there were no prerequisites, but I had to take certain classes while I was in the program. So I had to do anatomy. If you had it before, that was great. It was perfect. They loved it. But if you did not have it, they gave you the opportunity to learn it. And I think when you're thinking about like your future, if I had known that I would have ended up in occupational therapy in high school, I probably would have taken science, because it would have made my life a lot easier. But I didn't know that, and not many people know where they're going to end up 5 years down the line. So
the schools kind of limit you, like, you don't seem smart, you do business.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, your grades didn't meet it, so be gone. But that program was actually very thoughtful in terms of understanding that we might have great future occupational therapists who do not have this foundation. How can we give it to them? And that's the class that I ended up in with 200 or 300 people, because a lot of people needed to take that course. So I ended up doing anatomy. I struggled very much so. There's just a smell of like decaying bodies was not for me. I did a lot of courses in the brain, how the brain works, how the brain functions, wheelchair adaptations, how to measure a person for a wheelchair, guiding people who are visually impaired, learning about different conditions and diseases and how it affects a person functionally. What else? I did the wheelchair stuff, physical stuff. I did a lot of child developmental stuff, learning about the different disorders and genetic problems that children might end up with. and kind of not only guiding the child in their developmental years through that, but also understanding the parent aspect of it. Like, the hardest part of working with children is not the children, it's the parents.
That's right. Okay, I got you. I'm glad you actually said that because one of the questions I legit had for you is how do you address concerns, of a frustrated patient or the patient's family?
Yeah, I have a great support team, and if I see something happening with a client or a client's family, I would address it with my supervisor or the psychologist, and then kind of get their ideas about it and how to approach it, because I acknowledge that I'm still pretty young in this field and I might not know the best way to address people in certain situations, especially not understanding how it might feel to go through this. But then I have colleagues who have been working for over 20 years and have experience interacting with patients and their families and might know what to say or who to refer to. So I've had those situations where a client might be frustrated or there's something that I need to tell the family and I just don't know how to do it, because in my feeling and in my head, I'm like, ugh, that's kind of hard to deal with. How do I bring it across,
I gotcha. Yeah, that sounds that it can be challenging, but it's all part of the.
It's part of the job.
Part of the
you
job,
have to,
yeah.
and it's not like you don't know what you're getting into. Like, there's conditions that I learned about early in school, and then I came and I was like, I will never meet somebody with that condition in St. Martin. Like, no way. And then what happens? There's one person with it, and I'm just like, wow.
But what has your job, I guess, kind of said to you about national health in a sense? Like, with a lot of those, like the patients and stuff that you deal with, is it stuff that some of these illnesses or diseases are, what do you say, like they're preventable? Yes. Okay.
I think preventative care is something that we as a society, as a community, in our culture, we don't really think about it to the point of like future health. And sometimes it's like, so a person might know that they have something like let's say diabetes, for example. You have diabetes. You know the impacts of diabetes on your health, and you do nothing about it. You continue following the same diet that you were before. You don't exercise and stuff like that. And then we end up with people with all of these complications, amputations, stroke, kidney problems, liver problems. And why? Because they don't either have the proper care or they don't take it seriously, and we're very taboo about diabetes. Like, people hear diabetes and they're like, oh, you just got low sugar, like, you'll be fine. It really isn't that.
It's very scary.
We have young people like in their 30s and their 40s who are sick who have diabetes, and they don't take care of themselves, and then they end up leading these like really poor quality life. And I just look at it and I'm like, I really have to breathe and stay calm, because I'm personally affected by this, and seeing people live with it and not take care of themselves while it is preventable, and I'm just like, wow. So I try to relate to people on a personal level. I try to talk to them about lifestyle changes and stuff like that. And there are people who can't do anything about it. I understand that, because maybe financially they can't afford proper food. Like, they just live on a minimum wage and they cannot afford to eat any healthier than what they are, and I understand.
And carbs are cheap.
Yeah, carbs are cheap, exactly. Fast food is cheap. Healthy food, on the other hand, is very expensive, and like, you can't tell them then just completely stop eating XYZ because that's what they can afford. But you can do other things that helps them to empower themselves and take on
maybe
responsibility.
walking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are some people though with diabetes that cannot change the way their body functions, carbs and stuff like that, and then have to take medication. But our culture on medication is just so, I'm not taking pills, and I can drink my bush, I can drink my my noonie, I can go in the sea and stuff like that. But it's just like, if your body is lacking something, I think
you need aid. But the thing is too, and I say this, one, my mom being a herbalist, me growing up on bush, you have to make it a lifestyle because it is preventative.
Yeah, it is.
But the thing is, people do it like
cures,
and at the last minute, like you 3 cups of bush tea when you like deep on the deep end, that ain't gonna do nothing for you. Like, for instance, since I could remember every single day like that, and my mom would give me specific bushes for specific things, but even like generally every day, there'll be like 2 different types of bush tea she would
Yeah.
give me every day, you know.
That's
and,
good.
and
That's preventative
yeah.
care.
so I think that's the other side of it too, that we need to understand, because yes, it's part of our culture, but then you have to have the cultural awareness of the use of it.
Yeah.
You can't just be, again, you're at the deep end, and
Yeah.
then you're like, let me just take.
And people wait.
two
People often
cups.
wait till things happen
Yeah.
to take action.
Mhm.
You know, if your body is giving you warning signs, your doctor's telling you things. They're telling you need to be more active. You need to eat less of this.
Drink
you
more
need
water.
to drink more water. Take it into account. Don't continue living the way you're living, and then when something happens, you get a stroke, you get a heart attack, you end up with another condition, and then you're just like, oh,
What happened?
yeah, you know, your body often sends out like warning signs, and listen to them, listen to your body. And I've learned that very early in my master's degree. I've learned that like I have to listen to my body. When you're tired, rest.
Yeah.
Don't push it.
Yeah, true. How do you, and with that, how do you cope in times when you feel like maybe you have an overwhelming workload?
I kind of determine how the rest of my day would look. So I have my schedule for my clients from the beginning of the day. I know who I'm going to see. I know what's going to happen. But then some things pop up, and then they're like, hey, Nikita, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you fix this chair? You know, like things always pop up. And early, I used to be like, yeah, I could do it. And I just wanted to do everything because people were calling, people needed help, and I would do it. And then I decided, you know what? This is taking a lot out of me. I need to organize my time differently and learn to say no. I cannot do this right now, but I will come to you tomorrow. You know, prioritizing yourself within your schedule is very important, because you can have your schedule, things can pop up, but you can reorganize that around the rest of your week. You know, if it's something that happens and it's like very urgent, then I would deal with it, but then kind of determine what the rest of my day would look like.
Gotcha.
And learning to say no is a very big thing for me.
That's another, cultural element that we gotta hop over, because we're kind of raised and taught to be people pleasers, and you don't reach for a life like that. People take advantage of you.
Yes.
So I just have 2 more questions for you. One of them being, what are the main or the most important skills necessary, we would say, to be successful in occupational therapy?
Being willing to learn, being willing to make mistakes, and understanding that you might not know everything. Yes, my program might have prepared me for a lot of different scenarios, but still understanding that I might not know everything, and knowing when to ask for help is a very big thing for me. Being successful in occupational therapy, being a self-learner, so being willing to investigate your own continued learning stuff. Next week I'm actually doing this toddler play conference that I found online, and I'm doing that for my personal development. No one's telling me, hey, you should do this. You have to
in yourself.
you have to invest in yourself. You have to look at your own personal growth. Yes, I have the job already. I have the degree, I have the job. I don't need to continue to do this. I do it for myself and my personal growth. Things are always changing. Therapies are always revamping, and keeping up to date with it, I think, is very important. And this is not only for the first 5 years of my career, but later on, I want to maintain those skills that I have. If you don't use it, you lose it. So.
Gotcha. And then finally, I think that's a good bridge to end off, is how has technology been integrated into your work?
Oh, well, that's actually a big one, because we would have people who come in and they can't do certain things that they did anymore. And I look at technology like apps and stuff like that to kind of help that person become more independent in their lives. There's ways that you can adapt things for people in order to, I have a client who's visually impaired but still wants to use her phone. How can I make her phone either talk to her, text to speech, speech to text, or magnify it in a way that it's easier for her to see? So technology has a big role in occupational therapy. I think that's something that sets us aside from other therapies. We find very creative ways to help people and make sure that they're function and independent in life.
Okay, gotcha. I'd like to thank you so much, Nikita.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the info that you shared. And just end off real here. I just checked out the study financial list,
Oh, okay.
the priority list. So they have made some improvements for Of course, there can be more adjustments, but nevertheless, it's good to see that change.
Oh, great.
Yeah, but with that, I'd like to thank you, and much success in your work and your career, and keep growing. And because I know that, you've always been a brilliant student and brilliant professional. So with that, I'd like to thank our listeners and viewers as well for joining us, and be sure to tune in again tomorrow. Take care.